Okay, all right. So here we go. All right, folks. Gonna give it 10 seconds because we've got a lot to talk about, and I want to make sure some of you guys are here and get my bangs in place so I don't touch them. All right. Well, happy Hot Mess Monday. Let me say that's a qualified happy. It's because I always say happy Hot Mess Monday, but I'm not necessarily super stoked on this Monday. So, and we're going to get into that in a little tiny bit with the amazing Elisa Camahort Page. I can't wait to talk to her. If you are new here and you haven't liked me on Facebook or liked Hot Mess Monday on Facebook, please do so. Go like us at Hot Mess Monday. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Sugar Jones. It's PG-13, sometimes a little rated R, but so I wouldn't open stuff in front of your kids. And don't forget to join the Hot Mess Monday Book Club, where I share invaluable links to awesome things that we've talked about and that people have shared on this chat. So you guys, how are you feeling? I woke up Saturday morning. My eyes were completely puffy from crying all night long Friday. I actually went out on Friday, listened to some live music, cheered me up for a little tiny bit, but there was still this just layer of sadness that I just couldn't break through. A couple other things going on, like this pandemic, the fact that we've hit the 6-month mark and depression has found its own depression. So, and I'm seeing that everywhere. And the 6-month mark tends to be traditionally the time when people are just like, can we just have the reset button? And here we are. And then we hear the news that RBG has left the planet, and what a loss. I want to cry right now just thinking about it. But I woke up Saturday morning, my eyes were completely puffy. I could barely open them. I opened them just enough to check Facebook to see what was going on. And I saw a voice of reason and wisdom speaking to us and saying, chill out, relax. We got some work to do. And that was Elisa.
Hi, Sugar.
Oh my gosh. Hi. Thank you. First of all, thank you for being here and taking some time out to chat. But I can't even tell you, I seriously am getting a little choked up right now thinking about how I felt Saturday morning, and then just it's all over, and I'm just going to pack my bags and move to Mexico, calling the family saying, make some room. The boy and I are coming down. And then you were just like, everybody just calm down. We've got, okay, yeah, it sucks, but we've got work to do. And it was so inspiring.
Well, I had my moment that night as well, because I was in this text group with a bunch of women I've known for many years and colleagues. And there was someone who was very much doomsday scenarioing in the chat. And I was like, that's not what has to happen, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of pushed back on all the reasons we were completely fucked. And I did something I never do, which is I left the text chain, which has been going on for literally years. I left it and deleted it from my phone because I mean, I can call the person. I know you can get back in. I can get back in it, but
you're not going to be like, Elisa's out forever. She's canceled.
I did a little silent flounce, and because I couldn't let that in. I couldn't let that invade my brain, and I didn't want to argue about it, because this was a smart person who is correct that there are doomsday scenarios,
right? But
I can't argue about that. That's the only scenario. So and that was pretty drastic for me. I don't know if I've ever done anything quite that, boom, this cannot be in my life right now. And that's why I got up in the morning and said, okay, if I'm going to do that, then I better have an alternate idea for people. Right. If I'm going to be so drastic, then I better, timeline that's better than this.
There. I think we lost you a little bit in the connection there, but yeah, I got.
Let me turn off the
I get it. This is what I tell my kids. I'm like, if you're going to complain, if you're going to, if you're going to complain about something, you should have a solution. And that's kind of how if I don't have a solution to something, I don't like to sit there and just be like bah, 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 the whole time. But I honestly felt like I had no solutions on Saturday morning. So really quickly, before I forget, because I feel like everybody I know knows you, but there may be people who don't know who you are. So real quick, I totally forgot to do this, you guys. Elisa Camahort Page. She is author, advisor, and entrepreneur. She is one of the founding members or founding three trio that created Blog Her. And again, I'm going to maybe tear up over this too, but Blog Her is where my life completely changed. Oh, totally going to cry. Like it's where I found my tribe. I remember my first Blog Her conference. I cried going home because I was like, no, nobody at home understands me. All these women here understand me, and they understand why I need to type words into the void, and they understand that part of it, and they're going to help me get this, whatever feeling, whatever thoughts I have, get out into the world. And you guys gave a platform to so many of us, and I am forever grateful for that.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew who Elisa is. And you can find her at elisacp.com. And you're doing some other cool stuff too. Like you guys sold, and like you didn't just go into retirement. You're like, next chapter.
Right. Well, interestingly, the next chapter is funny. When I stayed at the company that acquired us for quite a couple of years.
You were the last holdout, weren't you?
I was the last one because I was working on stuff a little different than. The stuff I worked on for Blog Her was stuff they didn't do yet. So I wasn't overlapping with anyone. And so it was easy to kind of slot in and help them start to do that stuff. And I actually went to the CEO of that company a week before Election Day in 2016 and pitched him on the idea that it was time for me to gracefully transition away, and that I would, I had some other things I wanted to work on, and I would stay through the Blog Her 17 conference, but then, kind of move on. And my idea was to write a book, but it was going to be some leadership woman business, something like that, and instead a week later, that was because I thought I knew what kind of universe we'd be living in. And a week later, I woke up, and thought I knew what kind of day we were going to have in November of 2016. Yeah. And when it didn't go that way, the next day, one of my co-authors, Carolyn, reached out, had a dream about writing a book about how to protect and advocate for your own personal democracy and what that means for you. And would I join her? And I invited my third co-author, Jamia Wilson, to join. And we worked on it for a while to make sure we were simpatico and had the same ideas about what the book should be. And we ended up going for that. So it was a very different path that the election threw me into, which was back into sort of activism and advocacy.
Different path that the election threw us all into.
Yes, I think so.
It did, though. I will say it has torn our country apart in a lot of ways, but it's brought a lot of us together, because we weren't always on the same side of a lot of arguments, and we still respected each other. But now now there's a difference between like humanity and inhumanity. And I know some people that are on the red side don't understand that a lot of what they're talking about has nothing to do with like helping anybody really. And my son, you'll be proud of this, I've accidentally raised 3 socialists. Because we've always had that heart, right? No matter what I thought, like politically, there were some things I was like this and that, blah, blah, blah. But we've always had this service mentality. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel that in any way, shape, or form in the other party. And I just couldn't even, I can't argue for anything that may remotely sound logical on that side anymore, because there's so much bad.
Well, I think that for some people, the bad stuff is the feature, and it excites them and enthralls them and makes them feel like, finally, I can say this shit I've been thinking out loud. For other folks, I think it's a bug in that they're not comfortable with it. Gosh, they wish the language wasn't so harsh and it wasn't so divisive. They don't actually hear the same things that the rest of us hear. They don't see the same things. There's a new organization called truthnotlies.org, which is designed to try and help that third population kind of start to broaden their view of what the facts are and what reality is. And I think that's part of the problem, is that really it seems like there are a couple different sets of facts in this country, and it can really, and part of that is about news and media outlets, but part of it is about social platforms that I consider to be media outlets, but they won't admit it. And they are, humans make the algorithms that drive people deeper into the holes of unreality and don't do enough to combat it in the way that traditional media outlets, other than a few accepted, have a little bit more.
If you notice how it worded this chat, because if you word the chat in a certain way with words like election or vote, you get like shadow banned. This nothing comes up. So I'm like, the big day in November, Can't say the election, can't use Trump. Like there's so much stuff. I noticed like one time I used Trump in my description and nobody saw this chat. So I went back in, fixed the description, and boom, all of a sudden it showed up everywhere.
Wow, so interesting. I don't use his name. I call him P45 asterisk. It's because I just don't like.
Yeah,
I don't need that negativity in my life either.
Yeah, I rarely use the name either, but that for some reason I just was like, how else do I say it? I think it might have been an alliteration. I was like thinking I was so clever. So no, was not clever whatsoever. So when you were talking on Saturday morning, you kind of like, we were honestly the only benefit of the crying on all night Friday night. And I don't know if anybody else got this, but my puffy eyes, like all here, just like all filled up. And it looked like I had like $2,000 worth of filler under my eyes. And I was like, yeah.
That is not the way I want to address that is not the method I want to pursue.
No. But if you would have seen the top, it was like Garfield. It was like all closed down. So bad. But you were like, calm down, everybody, like relax. It was sad. And we've all mourned. And I felt like there were some beautiful tributes all weekend long, gorgeous things. But there's something that I wanted to share with, like, and I say this to my kids all the time, like, no, you guys, your mom was alive when this was happening. And they're like, no, they're like, no, I'm serious. Like, I remember my grandma and my mom. I remember seeing my mom, and I remember her very young face, and my grandmother sitting on the couch, and me sitting looking at them going, what are they staring at? They were just staring, waiting for the news to find out if certain outcomes had, if anything had happened from certain, Supreme Court decisions. So back in the time that Elisa and I were young little girls, sitting in front of a glowing TV with like a thing that went tink, 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 tink. We had no remote controls, children.
You had to get up and walk.
You had to get up, and you were the remote control.
Yeah.
Mom's like, change it to channel 7. I'm like, I gotta walk 5 feet and go change the damn channel. But there was something that was going around, and I have to read this because it just blows my kids away. Not really me, because I remember it. If you have a credit card in your own name and your own credit history, if you've leased an apartment or bought property in your own name, if you've consented to your own medical treatment, if you played a sport in school, you can thank Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That shit was not allowed when we were.
This was the 70s. I think it was the 70s before a woman could get a credit card on her own.
Early 70s. Early 70s. Yeah. And it inspired a lot of women to leave their a-hole husbands. My stepdad he can be a very nice, generous man, but he was not a great husband. And my mom, finally had the opportunity to be like, screw this. I'm taking, my kids, and I'm going to go forge ahead on my own with them. And it was a struggle. It wasn't easy because divorce was also it was very frowned upon.
Right.
We lived in this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about some of the things that, someday, 100 years from now, they're going to say that about marriage equality in 2000 and, and they're going to say about that. It's just that, she was responsible for a lot of progress as a lawyer, even before she became a Supreme Court justice. She brought lots of cases. And the thing is, the thing that made me really sad Friday night.
Marriage equality. My son, so my most socialist, probably my most radical child is gay, and he came out at 13. He came out very young. And I think a lot of young men probably wanted to do that, but he still struggled at that whole year with a lot of pushback from kids and just some ugly things that he went through that we had to go back and forth. And I couldn't believe, I'm like, what year is this, right? But he was comfortable enough at 13 years old to come out. Had he been raised in our generation or our parents' generation, he wouldn't have done that.
It would have been a very different story. I still remember one of the biggest high drama moments from my high school life was around a friend who it was discovered that he was gay. And it was just very dramatic. Of course, we were the theater kids, so it was kind of, most things were very dramatic, but that was like the most dramatic, which I think tells you something. I mean, and of course, just a few years later, it would have been, pretty, like right now, I think, or remember the character on My So-Called Life, Ricky, who was totally kind of groundbreaking. So, we do make progress, and we will make progress again, even though it doesn't feel like it right now. But there's definitely stuff we can all do to try and there's basically two phases of stuff we can do, right? Okay. There's the stuff we can do
where everybody needs to pull out their pencil and notebook and write this shit down.
So the first phase of what we can do is try. I don't know if it's possible, but we can try to stop them from confirming a new Supreme Court justice. How that's going to work is not by, if your senators are Democratic senators, you can message them once and tell them, I don't want you to do this. They probably weren't going to anyway, but it's good for you to tell them. They should know. And by the way, in case you didn't know, calling their office, using ResistBot, maybe sending a postcard are the three best ways. Do not send actual mail letters to your Congress people, because they get sent to another place to get checked for like ricin and anthrax and stuff, and they get delayed. They could get delayed months. I mean, they're very behind. So don't ever send mail. But calling their office and talking to a staff person, either the local office, because there's always people staffing that, or the DC office is fine. Sure, let them know. But the thing to remember is that the Democratic senators really can't do much, and the Democratic House can't do anything. I mean, they really have nothing to do with this unless it becomes somehow with the Supreme Court justice. I don't think they have anything to do with it. So what the House does doesn't matter. And asking Nancy Pelosi to do anything about it, useless. Asking your Democratic senators to do more than just make their own statement about how outrageous they think they are and confirm that they will vote no. That's what they can do. There are not there's no procedural effort they can make. First of all, because they're in the minority and most of the 2/3 stuff has been thrown out the window, particularly for Supreme Court justices.
Which is ridiculous.
Second of all, because we're near the end of this session, and the Republicans have been all about not getting stuff done except for judges, right? They're not bringing a lot of bills where somehow they would need a Democrat to help them. They're not doing that, and they're able to
ramming so many judicial appointees throughout the entire country. So thank you for bringing that up. You guys, this is the Supreme Court justice we're talking about right now, but there are so many appointees that have been made in the last several months that nobody talks about. I mean, not even locally are being talked about. And I feel like that needs to be bubbled up, because really legislation that is going to affect you immediately is local.
Yes. So stop looking to the Democrats to have, that's on us, the people, like that. The majority is real in the Republican majority in the Senate. So stop looking to them to pull a magic trick out of their hat. They don't have one. So all it does to spend more time criticizing the Democrats for not doing something to stop it than to criticizing the people who are trying to do evil shit is it just depresses Democratic vote and helps Trump. So just don't spend your energy there. It's not useful. What is useful?
And that's when you're cutting out.
In a state with Republican senators.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
So what is useful? Because you kind of like glitched a little.
Okay. Okay, what is useful? If you live in a state with Republican senators, of course, flood your senator's office with the message you don't want them to vote. But more than that, there's about 12 to 14 senatorial races right now where either a Republican is in danger of losing their job, or a Democrat is really close, to taking a seat that wasn't filled by a Republican, that was open. And Republicans in those states, they could be afraid of two things. They could be afraid of personally losing their job, like Susan Collins in Maine, or they could be afraid that a Democratic wave, another wave, because we had one in 2018, they could be afraid that it will damage the opportunities for the whole GOP, the whole Republican Party in their state for years to come. And so they could be feeling somewhat protective of not doing something that will enrage enough people that it will damage. So, for example, in Iowa, not only do you have Joni Ernst, who's running against a very viable candidate, Teresa Greenfield, and she's in office right now, and you could ask her, and her co-senator, the senior senator, is Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley is like 87 years old. He won election in 16, I believe. So he's not running this time. And is he going to run when he's 89? Well, I wouldn't put it past him, but he may be in a position where he's looking a little more forward beyond his own personal power and saying, if we do this, will Joni Ernst lose? Will the Republican Party in Iowa be dealt a grievous blow? He has said in the past he didn't think that they should vote on a Supreme Court justice. Right. So if you live in Iowa, it might be worth reaching out to both of those folks. If you're not living in one of these states, and I list in that Facebook Live and in my latest podcast episode, there's about 12,
put a link to that, you guys.
12, 13, 14 states. If you don't live there yourself, don't reach out to those senators. They really don't care, and their staff won't even record what you say. But go through your friend list on LinkedIn, on Facebook, your contacts. Go through your friend list and make sure your friends know, hey, you're in a really pivotal state. Your Republican senator is in danger of losing their job, and they may be swayed if you make sure they know how many Mainers or Arizonans or North and South Carolinians or Iowans, but it's not important for you to call those states. It's important to find out who your friends are in those states and ask them to reach out, because all they care about is their own personal power, a little less so the power of their party in their state, and a little more so national power for their party, because they have a lot to lose by going against Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell controls a lot of stuff for them, and so they have to be really afraid they're going to lose their job. If you're not in one of those states, then donating money to those other states is a good idea. You can do it a couple of ways. You can do it individually. Kirsten Gillibrand has her group Off the Sidelines, and they are doing some raising money, which they're splitting amongst some key senatorial candidates. Pod Save America started an effort as well that is doing that, splitting it amongst 13 or 14 candidates. And we're all of us out here are saying pretty much the same races. Yeah. To follow, to donate to, and to ask your friends who are constituents to care about. So that's like item number one is we can try to do that. Mark Kelly in Arizona is a really important race because it's a special election. And so if he wins, he'll take office actually in November, not January. Right. So if they can ramrod through picking a nominee, I totally believe Trump's going to pull a name out of a hat. He's going to nominate someone, he said this week, Friday or Saturday. Normally the process to vet that person takes a long time, and it's not clear they could even get the vote in before election day, but they're not going to care about process. They don't give a fuck, because they know they have a basically open, they know that the Republicans are just chomping at the bit to do this. So they're just going to
have these two names have been floated.
Yes.
And for two very, very conservative women. One is a Latina, which, okay, yay on that, but that's it. That's as far as the yay goes for me. But these two women are very, I sometimes I just don't understand women or Mexican women or Mexicans on the Republican side, because I'm like, they are so anti the things that are so important.
I think that the Latina woman
are very anti-women.
The Latina woman is from Florida, I think, and she's Cuban. Yeah. And people ask me all the time, how could a quarter of Hispanic Because we're not some monolithic block, right? And
Right.
not only is there the conservative Catholic element to think about, but for Cuba, this whole trying to paint the left as socialist is very specifically directed at people like Cubans who have, got out of Castro's Cuba, and they're very, very, very anti-left in that way. And
no, for sure. Like my mom will, she's a liberal, she's a Democrat, or she says she's a Democrat liberal, but she's a very conservative woman. And we have very, very, like, our families are very conservative. Me just coming on live on Facebook, my dad's like, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? Loses his mind.
I will say all my older, I'm a first generation American, and my dad, when he married my mom, he got a citizenship, and he brought over his parents and his sisters and brothers, 7 of them. And so we got together every Sunday, family, and my youngest aunt is only 10 years older than me. And because my abuelita had like 10 children. I don't know what the span was there. And all my aunts and uncles on the older side of that spectrum still go to mass every Sunday, still super conservative, still super Catholic. And then the ones that are more close to my age, super Democrat, super because she basically grew up in California, because they came here when she was, I don't even know, 10 years old or something.
My dad is he's actually like number 2 Knights of Columbus in his church. I didn't even know this because I don't go to Catholic church anymore. I just found out like last year. I'm like, when did this happen? And I'm like, wait, you got divorced. Does the Pope know this?
Wow. Oh, that's interesting.
They've gotten a little funny about the divorce stuff. But
I think they only care if you marry again. They don't care if you get divorced. You just shouldn't marry again. Isn't that it?
Yeah, because we're property.
Yeah. So that's like one thing you can try to do. Now, let's just say, sure, we're not going to be able to stop it, and they're going to name a Supreme Court justice. And let's just say we can't convince 4 senators, or after Mark Kelly is elected, 3 Republican senators to vote no. So of course they're going to try and make it happen. Of course they are. And let's just say none of that works. Let's just say they get the Supreme Court justice. We still not only need Biden-Harris to win, to have a chance to rectify this, but we need to care about everything up and down the ballot. Exactly. It makes literally no sense to walk around right now and contribute any voter depression, is what I call it. So we know there's a voter suppression problem, and we know it targets Black and brown voters and basically liberal Democratic communities. We know that, right? So we know there's voter restriction going, which is they'll let you vote, but you have to travel 30 miles to do it, or it's only in these hours, or you can't do early voting, or you can't do absentee. So they're not literally kicking you off the rolls or disenfranchising you like they're doing right now to the former felons in Florida, but they're making it super hard. And this is all meant to depress you. In 2016, a big chunk of the Russian disinformation campaign was about depressing the vote of African Americans, not to get them to vote for Trump, to get them to stay home, to depress the vote. And we inadvertently do this all the time when we complain more about the Democrats than the Republicans, because I complain about my country because I want it to be better. And I can say the same thing about the Democrats. But for the next 42 days, I'm begging you to not say a negative word about the party that you want to be in power more than the other party. Yeah. Like, we can all fix it. We can try to fix it later. But anything you do now that's negative doesn't help anyone but the Republicans. But the other thing is, we talk about, this is what made me leave the chat group. Then they'll have a stacked Supreme Court, and Trump's going to sue if he doesn't win. And then it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and they're going to make him president. And that's it. End of story. Done deal. That's what's happening. It's over. And I'm like, okay, first of all, we do not need to ever buy and repeat Republican talking points, Republican narratives. You only help them. I've seen people say, ask Mitch McConnell to uphold the McConnell rule or principle from 2016 as a reason not to vote for Supreme Court justice. That's no rule. There's no principle. I'm not going to validate what McConnell 16 because I want him to do it again in 20. A, he doesn't give a fuck what I think. He doesn't care. And B, we don't want to validate and legitimize what he did in 2016. So I would just never articulate calculate for Biden to win by one vote, just like the Republican Party would do. I understand the principle of saying, oh, if it's a big enough win, then it's less likely they will question it. Do not make your decisions based on what you think they will do, because they have no ethical framework or moral low point, so they will fight no matter what. Leave it out of your mind. If Joe Biden wins by one electoral vote, he is the president, and that's it for me. That's
Period.
it. He does not. We need to win by a landslide. We cannot set the precedent that somehow Democrats have to win in a different way than Republicans do. This is already the case because of gerrymandering. By the way, Democrats have to win by higher percentages.
That was one of the things I was saying. I was like, maybe we should all just move to red states. And my son was like, Mom, we wouldn't have to do that if gerrymandering wasn't an issue. That kid is smart. That kid's gonna my son is
very smart. Now, where does
blow it up first?
You bring up a great point, which is gerrymandering is just one of the many reasons that all the down ballot races matter so much. Mm-hmm. And when you depress a vote for Joe Biden because he wasn't your first pick, or you depress a vote for Kamala Harris because she worked from the inside of a system and you don't like that, you're not just depressing a vote for them, you're depressing any chance of coattails, and we need the coattails. Any person who doesn't show up to vote for Biden Harris is also not showing up to vote for state offices. State level is where gerrymandering happens, where redistricting happens. State level, state attorneys generals are most of the people who bring the lawsuits that end up going up the judicial chain to the Supreme Court. If you had a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president and Democratic governors and legislatures and attorneys general, the cases before the Supreme Court, we would not be leaving so much of our fate in their hands. Right now, we look to the Supreme Court to save us from Republican legislatures and governors because we don't show up for midterm elections. We don't show up for primaries. We don't show up for special elections. And that is why there are states with red governors and legislatures where the majority of the populace identifies as Democratic or Democratic leaning. And it does become a turnout game. So you need to show up because every race matters. And here in California, we've got some propositions that probably, I'm concerned about. They're not doing well, and they're super important. One of them would push back on Prop 209, which was about affirmative action. And one of them would push back on some of the stuff they did in Prop 13, which has been harming public schools since I was in high school. That's the first political speech I ever gave, was an anti-Prop 13 speech at a rally in my high school auditorium.
That also happened in our lifetime. I remember that.
Yes. And it was immediately felt. My sister, I graduated and she went to my high school and was a freshman so she's 4 years younger than me. And in my 4 years, we did every year, the theater department had a musical and a straight play and a little variety show we did. And by the time she got to high school, they didn't do musicals anymore because they were more expensive to produce and because the funding had already been cut to arts programs. It was like bang, bang. They cut, a bunch of the choirs. Like that was immediate the next year or two. So these things matter. And so that's another thing, is that you really think about when you talk to people online, you may know that you're going to vote come hell or high water. I never miss a vote. I'm going to vote. Of course I'm going to vote. And so like 6 months ago, I was like, well, if so-and-so wins, I had my favorites in the race. I had a bunch of them. Right. And I was like, well, and none of them were white guys. I'll just be honest. All the people I supported were not white guys. And there were like 5 or 6 of them. So when it got down to be Bernie Biden, I was like, well, of course I'll vote for whoever it is, but that's it. I'm not going to, I don't want to go from to another 70 something white. I said all the things. I'm not going to give them money. I'm not going to volunteer. I'm not going to be rah, rah. Well, I got over myself. And now I know in 2016, I was very in a lot of private groups where we were all inspired and trying to buck each other up about Hillary Clinton. But in public, we would try to be super chill. Mostly so as not to trigger people on the left versus like people on the right. And I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to be super chill. It's a notorious problem, right? It's just something that happens so much. It's just even I just hear all the time, like, oh, this person and that person.
and even just the fighting over thanks for voting for Jill Stein 4 years ago. I still see that. I saw that this week. I'm like, we could sit there and, tear at every little thing. But the thing is, this is about the country. This isn't really now necessarily about two people. This is everything. Right.
It's not about
on the freaking line.
It's not about personality. It's not about perfection. And what I didn't get to because I was going on too much was when you talk online, you don't know who you're talking to. 40 to 45% of our eligible voters didn't vote in 2016, don't vote most of the time.
Blows me away.
And it will take any excuse. And the biggest excuse that can be used is my vote doesn't matter. My vote won't be counted. My vote doesn't count. Mm-hmm. And when you engage in the kind of doomsday scenarioing, as I call it, you don't know who you're talking to. It's like, see, yeah, it doesn't matter anyway because they're just going to do this.
Yeah, I call that catastrophizing.
Yes,
and we tend to do that a lot. I mean, I feel like, and right now there's a lot to catastrophize about.
Yes, there is.
Quite honestly, I'm in San Diego. Our county is about to shut down again. Which is a bummer. I know it's been a bummer. I feel like most people have been really good, but we're pretty much the only county that's been open. So guess what? The entire state has showed up for the last month. And it's just, and we're just like none of us can go, we can't even go to the grocery store, there's people everywhere. And I don't know. It's just, when I go to the beach, I make sure I'm away from people. When I do things, I make sure I'm away from people, but people from Orange County that vote red, they show up and they're like, they're not wearing masks and they're doing all the things. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Get out of my county. But so there's anyway. I went
there is a lot to catastrophize about. And second of all, I'll bring up this: the Republicans everyone always says, why aren't we like the Republicans? Why aren't we lockstep? So on message, so 100%.
Things to fight for.
Well, here's the thing: the registered Republicans are now only 22 to 23% of the electorate. It has narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. They're now a very homogenous. And like you said, they focus on two or three things: guns, abortion,
and
taxes. And underlying it all is a way of trying to sustain white supremacy, trying to sustain that white guys get to be in power, even when they're the minority of the population. And I think that that's what Mitch McConnell and those folks are zealots about. They're zealots about thinking that they are better equipped to take this country anywhere because they do think they're superior. Yeah. So it's easy for them to be lockstep. It's easy for them to be very on message. And because they don't give a rat's ass about being accurate or rational, people always say to me, defund the police. We should think of a better word. And I'm like, you know what? The Republicans didn't try to find a better word for death panels. They wanted heightened emotion. They didn't care if it was accurate. They didn't care if it was hyperbolic. They wanted emotion. They wanted to dominate the conversation. So I'm like, let's not dismiss language. Let's not try and add 17 words to it to make it more clear. It doesn't make it more clear.
Defund what we mean is blah, 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 blah.
It's harder for this, all of the most moderate, from a moderate Republican through centrist Democrats all the way to the far left. That is it's a cliche, but it is a very big tent. We care about lots of different issues. You're not going to care. Let's say there's 25 different issues to care about. You're never going to get no candidate is going to have the right mix for you. No candidate. I don't care who they are. It has the position that everyone on that spectrum likes at any point in that spectrum. And so that's why it's harder. It's harder for us to agree on language. It's harder for us to be lockstep. It's harder for us to not yell at each other as much as we yell at the other side. But all I can think when I see people who I know are lefty pundits doing nothing but tearing down and criticizing, they want to call it the Democratic establishment. And I'm like, well, right now, that's the only establishment you got. And this is what I always say. If you're going to be on the streets protesting, which I have done too in these last 6 months, is the only being around other people I've really done. Claim to care. The other side doesn't even claim to care. They are calling you criminals. They are calling you anarchists. They are trying to make you second-class citizens for even taking to the streets and exercising our constitutional rights. So if it's me, I want to be protesting to people who at least claim to care. And that's got to drive everything.
Yeah. And this, and I keep mentioning my son because he was out every weekend. He didn't stop. That kid was out when there were 3 people on a corner.
Yeah,
he was like, and it was hot and he had to wear a mask. And, but he was like, I'm going out there. And he has like called himself an anarchist. He's like, Mom, I probably will blow something up someday. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll start saving up my bail money now. But that's the thing. Those kids are coming up and they're on fire, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like, and there is a lot of fighting between them, just the messaging, because they're seeing it from us. They're seeing all of us being like, rah, 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 and tearing each other down. And, we really do need to like unify, maybe not necessarily around 2 or 3 points, but just unify, being like, this is how we save the world. That's how we come back, we're like, save the cheerleader, save the world, like save the Democratic Party. Let's fix the shit within and keep going from there. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about the total, like just all or nothing, but that's what works for Republicans. And that's why they show up. And that's why they win, is because
it works for them because they're all very much the same, homogenous, narrow, niche. They have concentrated power and they're better at exercising that concentrated power than we are at bringing together our very diverse power.
I don't know. I like being in this party and this group and this fun so much better. I mean, God, for real, like we have better food.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. This is what I always say to people. I think that all the never Trumping Republicans should try and start a party down at the local level. We have a section in this in our book about how to start a third party. And you don't start a third party by running someone for president every 4 years. That's never been, that's not how you start a third party. I think the never Trumpy Republicans should start a third party. Call it, the real GOP. I don't know what they want to call it. I also think that there are people on the left who should, if they're serious, they should start a third party. I mean, or maybe rally around the Green Party if it's the Green Party's principles are comprehensive enough for them. But now is the time to try it. But if you're not doing that and you haven't done that, then shut the fuck up and figure out which of the two parties has a chance of making a difference.
This is, it sucks that it's a 2-party system, and we, every single one of us growing up in high school, we've all said the same thing. And then when we get to be, in our 30s and 40s, you're like, well, this is what we got. We got, but the thing is, so the 2-party system, like we do have ways of fixing things locally and everything, but this is what we have right now. And one of them is going to lead us down a really dark path. And one of them is going to be someplace where we can make some real positive changes. And, normally I like to say, well, everything just kind of happens at the local level. But what we've experienced in the last 6 months, the response to this pandemic has been just like, this is it. Like, we have to make this happen. Like in 6 weeks, I want to wake up to know that I'm not packing my bags to leave this country.
Well, this past week, we hit 2 milestones. You mentioned one. It's been 6 months since we've been in pretty much lockdown. And we also hit the 200,000 people dead. And we have become so numb
to it. But it's just another flu.
But where's the coverage? Where's the memorializing of those people? Where's the it's like we've lost our capacity. The number is so big, we've lost our capacity to care about it. So we can all focus on RBG or other individuals and be like really, really upset. But it's hard. This is actually proven. They know this about the human brain. Like if you try to talk to them about some enormous loss, it is hard to process. It is hard to act. If you show them one person whose life has been destroyed, you can rally around.
Do you remember now? I don't know. You probably remember this, but around I don't even know how many years after the first years of the AIDS crisis, there was that quilt project where everybody started making a quilt of everybody that had died. Yeah. And once you saw the enormity of that quilt being unfolded, I still get like really emotional about it because that was like I understood there was this disease, right? But until you saw that in stadiums, and these people were like friends that were unfolding a quilt of their friend that had died, and they might likely also be dead in the next year. That was so much. And so somebody said GMA earlier this morning had the human toll, and they had photos of the victims.
Oh, that's nice. I'm
yeah,
glad.
and we do that every year for 9/11. Every year for 9/11, we read the names, and every year, you know, we take that. But we've lost 200,000 in this one year. And if we were to sit down with names, how long would that take us to read those? Every single one of those people had family, had friends, had a job, they had plans for next summer. You know,
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And I get really pissed. So yesterday we did something we've only done twice in the last 6 months. And it was the only time I have 2 siblings and a step sibling, and all 4 of us went over to my mom's backyard, and we had our little seating set up so we could all sit separate. I hadn't seen my brother and his family in 6 months, hadn't seen my stepsister and her husband in 6 months. I had seen my folks, but for a long time it was just I would drop things off on their doorstep and then stand back. And then we have done a couple of backyard things. And what's really upsetting to me, so my mom is 80, my stepdad is a little younger, but he's currently doing chemo for cancer, so he's immunosuppressed. And in addition to the people who seem to think it doesn't matter if folks like that die, you know, and my grandmother, her mother lived to be 89, more than 89, almost 90. So I'm figuring she's not like wrapping it up anytime soon. She goes to a personal trainer. She's like,
wow.
He still does work around the house and builds things and stuff. So not only is it like so callous to say, well, they're older, they've had a good life, but why should their final years be locked up as prisoners in their home? Because it really makes me mad. They've been good citizens all their life, and this is the most that our government, our federal government, and expects for their future is that they're going to have to basically become hermits. You know, in their last few golden years, that's how they're going to spend them, because you couldn't get it together to have a national policy around masks, around testing, around tracing, around anything. It's just really.
My mom loves going. She has, she always goes to the theater in her town. You know, that's just a thing she does. She'll call us up and she's like, there's a show this Friday. Do you guys want to go? And she'll just buy tickets. She loves that. And it breaks my heart that she's been stuck at home this whole time, you know, and she always says, you know, oh, well, you know, she talks about who's at risk and everything else. And then one day she got really quiet and she's like, well, I'm one of the ones that could go. And, you know, she like started feeling that like they don't care, you know, and I could feel that, I could sense that. And like the last few times I've talked to her on the phone, we had a Zoom birthday call for my sister that she was very cheerful. But one of the calls, she said, you know, I pray for you every morning, and I just want you to know this, and I want you to know that. And I'm like, oh my God, my mom is saying goodbye to me.
No.
Like, no, my mom is too young, and I'm too young to not have my mom, you know? So, but the things that she was saying, I'm like, I can't even imagine. And you're right. Like these people, they paid taxes. They did all the right things. My mom's an American citizen, God damn it. You know, my grandmother was an American citizen. And, you know, here she is like telling her kids goodbye in these weird little ways. I hate it.
It's
I think
wrong.
it's so anyway, we are not going to let that happen.
No.
We're fighting for our moms and our nanas.
That's right. That's right. And for our kids to have normal schooling, and for our kids to like,
oh God, I know.
You know,
God,
anything. It's
just ridiculous.
You know what? Part of it is we're fighting. I know some people are like, hey, it wasn't all that. And not wonder. Mr. Fire has been set today. So I think we should not underestimate how many people just would like it to get back to normal, even if normal wasn't good enough.
Right.
And
Right.
that is one of my messages is like, you just won't have to wake up every morning and fear for what your supposed person in charge
Ooh,
has done or
dude,
not done.
that, I mean, honestly, like every day we wake up with just this sense of trepidation. Like, are
Yes.
we still here?
Yes. I mean, I, for one, cannot wait to not wake up every morning afraid of what might have happened overnight and what could happen today
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is what I say about, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm nothing, but to me, people wonder sometimes, well, is he lying? Is he just willfully ignorant? I'm like, is he lying? Yes. Is he willfully ignorant about things? Yes. I mean, he wants to do the stupid things sometimes. Yes.
Right.
Do I think he has some kind of sociopathic, narcissistic thing going on? Yeah, I do. Again, not a doctor, not diagnosing
Right.
him. Do I think he seems like he's having some kind of physical / mental or cognitive decline issues? Yes, I think that's true too. Do I think he's also a really bad person who just did not learn ever how to care about anything but himself and his own, what will get him personally ahead? And he's just really very, very bad. Yes, all those
Mhm.
things can be true. I no
Mhm.
longer care which one is driving which horrible
Right.
thing he said or horrible decision. I
Yeah.
call it his toxic combo platter of things I don't want in my president. And
That's awesome.
all things can be true at once. And
Yeah.
with him, I
And
think
and it's funny, and I'm kind of like, I'm ignoring the things of like, look, he did this, look, he did that. I'm like, look, yeah, he did all of that. Let's just vote him out. Just vote him out.
a
So that
stopped
we don't
clock
have
is
to look
right
into,
twice
like, we
thick.
don't have to second guess those things, the toxic combo platter. We don't have to guess which one of those
Right,
items it is today. We
right.
just don't have to think about them anymore.
They
And that,
all work. They all work together.
yeah, yeah, one feeds off the other.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the day that we wake up and we don't have any of those. So give me like a couple of real quick, I'm going to post them in the comments, but just like some websites that you were mentioning a few things earlier. I know Pod Save America is actually phenomenal, you guys. Like,
Yeah,
it's a
so they have Vote Save America, and they're raising money to split amongst the senators. Kirsten Gillibrand's PAC is off the sidelines. Hillary Clinton's PAC, Onward Together, is giving to a lot of organizations working on the vote, protecting it, motivating it, getting it out. So I think those are ways to let your dollar. It's sort of like having a managed investments. It's letting people kind of direct your dollars. You can, of course, do them, give to the Biden-Harris campaign, and you can, of course, give to individual candidates. I would also say look into, obviously, again, look where your friends are and let them know this stuff too. I would also say if you can volunteer to be a poll worker.
Yes.
It's actually not a volunteer. I don't know why I keep saying volunteering. It's a paid thing, I think. You can get paid to be a poll worker. They're afraid that with voter restriction policies going on, that the lines will be very long and it will depress the vote. So they're looking for poll workers and they're looking for people who are on the younger or healthier side, because a lot of poll workers are retired people who are more afraid to do it. And who could blame them? So step on up for our older, the typical poll worker. There is Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight is a great org working on voter suppression as well. So I think that's a great thing. Yes, I think that we should all be prepared to think about protests, and I think those have a place. Protests have a place. Vigils, marches, all of those things have a place, and they are important. I also think if you have a social media platform, it's important. People talk about slacktivism and, oh, don't be just an armchair activist. Well, if you've invested time, energy, building your community, building your platform, and you know that these folks listen to you and you have some influence, then talk about this stuff. We need to normalize that we all care about this. I totally believe, my friend Brandy Riley runs that influencer activist toolkit, which is all about trying to convince influencers that, if you're not talking about politics, it's because you don't have to, but lots of your friends and family must be nice, but there is a argue with saying we should vote in a democracy. So maybe you pick and choose your causes based on what you think is appropriate, but we can all pick and choose and do that. phone banking and text banking. I hate talking on the phone. So I've signed up for the text banking training through the Biden-Harris account, and they use Slack and another app. They don't use your real phone, and it's very, very easy. So you can do that. You can also work with Swing Left, and other organizations are doing voter registration and get out the vote drives through postcard writing, letter writing, and also some calling. There's just like a lot of different ways.
Is it swingleft.com or .org? I'm putting it in there.
I think it's .org. It's .org. So, and the thing is, the last thing I'll say, the last thing to be ready for is if it is the doomsday scenario that there's a new Supreme Court justice before the election or immediately after the election, whatever, there's something that the Democrats can do besides obviously win the elections. Need to flip the Senate, need to win the presidency, need to keep the House, need to get as many Democrats in state office as well. Then we need to convince our Democratic representatives that we want them to expand the size of the Supreme Court, that we want them to get rid of the filibuster, that we want them to expand the size of the federal judiciary, which Trump by now has appointed, I think, 1/3 of all people with seats, because Mitch McConnell didn't just block Merrick Garland from a Supreme Court seat. The other thing that didn't get any coverage or news was that he was blocking dozens and dozens of appointments. He blocked them all. He's really...
The news doesn't have enough time to cover everything that they've done. That's what's sad. It's so overwhelming what they've done, and nobody's really taking the time because we're getting inundated with everything else that we have to fear.
Yeah. Well, and also because
this is what's happening. And this is where I feel like when you reach out to your friends, you can share that information, because it's not that they're dumb or ignorant or anything, like none of that. It's overwhelming. And there are some of us that like love this shit, like
that's the thing.
Pick up the phone.
Part of the reason they're not covering it is because there's so much else to cover it, but part of it is because it's wonky. To talk about like all the federal judiciary appointments being held up is not very sexy. And really most media outlets are still really trying to drive, because their whole media model has been blown up in the last decade. So they're really still trying to drive eyeballs, clicks, views, and they're trying to do it with what's going to get more attention, and like stacking the federal judiciary is not really going to get the attention. Today, there's some huge power grab with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who, by the way, apparently shouldn't even be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He never got confirmed. He has now signed an order saying that the FDA and all the other federal agencies around health and human services can no longer just issue the kinds of orders and guidelines and things that they normally would, including around vaccines, including around drugs, that he gets to control. He gets the final word on everything.
What?
That's today. Chad Wolf. I mean, they're moving us towards an authoritarian state as fast as they possibly can, because they know they're going to lose. Here's why they're doing it. They know they're going to lose when the.
So that's the only good part of it. That's the only thing that gives me any hope, is that they're reading the numbers too, and they're seeing what's going on.
They're afraid, man.
Their time is up.
And they don't want to get indicted.
History right now with a few things, but their time's up.
Yep. And they don't want to get indicted. So they're trying to see if they can sort of manipulate. I mean, particularly Trump doesn't want to get indicted. I honestly think he wouldn't even care about re-election if it wasn't that he thinks he's going to get indicted. Right. But the Democrats, once they do take office and flip the Senate and do all that, you can expand the Supreme Court. You can get rid of the filibuster. You can expand the federal judiciary. Those are 3 steps they can take without changing the Constitution. And they need to be encouraged to know we support them in that, because we need to unstack what has been stacked through unethical means. There are other things I wish that would happen. I wish they would expand the size of the House of Representatives. I wish they would get rid of the Electoral College. I wish some states would get a third
Every
senator.
4 years, we're like, that damn Electoral College.
I know. I wish Puerto Rico and DC would be made states. I mean, these are all things the Republicans don't want, because they know when we expand our country, they get to be an even smaller slice. So they don't want any of that. I'll just say this. This is the thing I always say. When the Constitution was written, the largest colony was. So even leaving aside that things like the Electoral College and the way the Senate is two senators per state, no matter what size, those were all written to try and keep the slave-holding states in the country because they didn't want to count the slaves as fully human, but they didn't want to not have power. So they did these things. They created these ways to keep the Union together. And at the time, really the mathematical impact of it was a little bit, but not a lot. The biggest colony, 5 times the population. California is 80 times the population of Wyoming, 80 times.
And we get 2 senators.
And we don't get 80 times the electoral votes either. We don't get 80 times the representatives. We are California is the most disenfranchised state. And when people talk about, well, you don't want the minority to get run roughshod over by the blue states, the urban centers, the populous states. And I'm like, so we're happy then with the alternative, which is that the majority of Americans are run roughshod over by a minority. Right. And to a really stunning degree. And if it were me, the harder things to do will be to expand the House, add senators, make DC and Puerto Rico states. Getting rid of the Electoral College would take a constitutional amendment. So, there are way harder things to do, but expanding the Supreme Court and the judiciary and getting rid of the filibuster are not hard things to do.
Yeah.
And we should all be ready to tell the Democrats we were serious. We want them to do it. And we want them to take those steps to get back some balance and rationality into our 3 branches of government.
God, rationality. Wouldn't that be so great?
It would be so great.
That'd be awesome. I know. Vote rationality for 20.
It would be so great. I would enjoy it very much.
Yes, please. All right, Elisa, we've been on for an hour.
I can talk about this stuff all day.
My longest Hot Mess Monday ever. You definitely blew the doors off the vibrator episode 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
So
Yay!
you want to go back and watch that, you can. It's all So thank you. I appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Everybody. I'm going to put in all the notes. You kind of cut out a few times, but I'm pretty sure we caught all the important stuff. And I just appreciate you so much. I appreciate what you've done for all of us through Blog Her and what you continue to do. And I'm so glad I was able to just calm the fuck down on Saturday morning, just hearing you say it's going to be okay. We have work to do, but it's going to be okay. So you've just been awesome. Thank you so much from the entire internet to you.
Oh, thank you.
So, all right. Well, I'll see you on Facebook and Twitter. All right. Thanks, Elisa.
Bye.
All right, you guys. So thank you so much for hanging out for as much as you did or as little as you did or whatever you popped around in. But please remember, this is the most important election that you've probably ever experienced. So if you are eligible, get the fuck out there and vote. It's not just about a couple of people going for a president and vice president. It's about our country. It's about our country's future. It's about, like we were talking about earlier, local elections. It's about everything. Everything is on the line in this election. So come together on the left. We all just need to get along and be this one big, giant, massive, powerful blue wave, and then wake up on November 4th knowing that everything's going to be good again. All right, you guys. I appreciate everything. I appreciate all your eyeballs, all your comments, and all your support. And I will see you next Monday. Bye.